Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister. Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister of Minneapolis, which is historically a humanist congregation. And this is Coffee and Wisdom, where we look at where humanism has been, where it is now, and where it's going, and also at some of the theological framework that is built into Unitarian Universalism and ultimately in humanism as sort of a background. This week we've been looking at some of the theological terms that come out of Christianity, just to see, well, where was Unitarianism on this? Where was Universalism on this? Before humanism kind of separates out and goes in a fairly different direction. So far, we've been looking at Christology, that is, what is Jesus all about within all of this? There are various kinds of ideas about that. We've looked at hermeneology, which is a sin. Is there such a thing? And then what does it mean? Yesterday, we looked at theodicy, that is, why does evil happen in the world? And we pretty well have to skip cosmology and anthropology. This is has become a culture war issue in the United States. Does the book of Genesis describe reality that could have been videotaped, or is it all metaphor, et cetera, et cetera? So cosmology and anthropology are definitely parts of a culture war thing between the right and the left within Christianity, and also within Christianity and more secular people. So that's a difficult one. And we'll skip over it for now. Today I want to look at soteriology, that is the doctrine of salvation. Now, this word is Greek. It comes from soteria, which means salvation, okay, or preserver. Soter is a preserver, a savior person, right? And of course, logos is study. Also, we have this odd and interesting thing here, because if soteriology is the doctrine of salvation, then what is the word salvation? And that is the Greek translation of soteria into salvere, which means to save. It's a verb. Okay, so it's a circular definition, in other words. I should mention that salve as an ointment is of Germanic origin, and it's a false cognate in that they don't even have remotely the same roots. But salve, yay, salve is like saying hail or farewell, or with a kind of the position that ciao now functions in Italian. So this is the study of salvation doctrines, but it is a circular definition. What is salvation, and salvation from what? And one good question would be, does Buddhism, for example, have a soteriology? Do other religions do this as well? Because it's very clearly coming out of Christian Greek thinking. Well, here is one answer to the path to salvation. What does it mean to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior? And here we have this picture. We know what it means to this particular theological way of thinking. There's Jesus with a crown, or Christ in the Christology, at the gates of heaven, which clearly are marked with a Christian cross. This is the Christian heaven, and the only one within this way of thinking. And we have all of the white-robed people, good Christians, who have been saved in the soteriology. And there they are headed off to heaven, which appears to have quite a few high rises up there. So that's one way of seeing soteriology, and it is the baseline of Christianity all the way back. Although there was a lot of disagreement before the Nicene Creed, as we've seen over and over. In the 300s and 400s, Christianity suddenly becomes orthodox. But before that, there were several ways of thinking about this. I found this on the internet, the primer on soteriology. It should say primer on Christian soteriology, but again, often we see, Christianity is the only actual way to think about this. Oh, okay, not so much. But there is predestination. We know about Calvinism, that is that God knows everything from the foundations of the creation of the world, and therefore God knows who will and won't go to heaven in the end. And there's nothing you can do about it on this earthly plane. You either are or you're not. That's Calvinism. It went right into the Puritanism that came into the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the United States. Also, it is a doctrine within Presbyterianism and some other forms that come out of Calvinism. Also, there's exclusivism. That means that there are some people who are going to make it. There is a reference in Revelation to 240,000 saints who are going to go to heaven, the only ones, and that is an exclusive club, and you either are or you aren't in it, and you get mailed the card, and you are or you don't, and there's nothing you can do about it. Inclusivism means that there is something you can do about it. And this is the baseline for evangelical fundamentalist Christianity today, and also several other ways, Methodism, etc. Most Baptist sects believe this as well. That is that you can do something about it to get your soteriology, your salvation. You can go down to the front of the altar at some revival or church, and by golly, you too will be included in the saved. But ding, ding, here it appears universalism in its true form. Nowadays, Unitarian Universalism, we don't talk much about this because most Unitarian Universalists don't believe in the classic Christian heaven and hell ideology. So not so much anymore, but in the good old days and within strict Christian theology, universalism takes two forms: universal grace or universal salvation. And here they say soft or hard. Universal grace means that everyone will get there. It's according to how difficult the path is. And in this way of thinking, and we talked about that a couple of weeks ago in early universalism, there is a hell and bad people do go there, but it's to be purged of their sins, to pay for their sins, and then, by golly, up they pop and go to heaven. The other way of seeing this, universal salvation, is it's being called hard here. That's called the death and glory people. That is that everybody, yes, Adolf Hitler and Attila the Hun, everybody, as soon as they die, off they go to the heavenly city, no matter what. So there you go. That's universalism. And then pluralism, which from this way of thinking is saying that there are other ways to heaven through other religions. Unitarian Universalists don't tend to think much about that either. But Universalism is all about soteriology, or it was in its classical Christian form previous to the merger with Unitarianism. Unitarianism, however, and I did mention William Ellery Channing and how he was redefining the idea of sin, that sin really is just acting badly and you have to improve your character. That comes to be called salvation through character, and it is the classic Unitarian way of thinking, the classic Unitarian Christian way of thinking. We don't talk about that much anymore. Character as a term doesn't appear very much in American conversation anymore, but that definitely was the way Unitarians thought all the way through the mid-20th century. Well, do other traditions have a soteriology? Well, here is classic Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths of Buddhism is dukkha, that is the truth of suffering; samadhi, the truth of the cause of suffering; nirodha, the truth of the end of suffering; and magga, the truth of the path to get out of the suffering. The proposition for Buddhists is this: to live is to suffer. I can buy that one, having lived. Yep, there is suffering in life. Now, I should mention quickly that suffering and pain are not the same idea within Buddhism. They know that pain is something, if you stub your toe, it hurts. Doesn't matter how enlightened you are, it still hurts. You do have a body. But suffering is a psychological, a mental pain. So to be alive is to suffer, say the Buddhists. Desire, and this is probably the wrong definition. It's the classic one into English. It comes from the late 19th century, probably not the best. Grasping is probably the better term there. Grasping after stuff is what causes our suffering. We want. All right. We can cease that desiring or that grasping, and doing that stops our suffering. Okay, but wait, how do you stop grasping? Well, you follow the eightfold path that will end your desire or your grasping. And then, yeah, Google eightfold path, and it gives you a formula for how to live a life that is outside of suffering. Although, of course, do you really get outside of suffering ever? And this is a discussion of, in different sects of Buddhism, how much suffering really does cease. And if it's totally ceased, of course, you become a Buddha and off you pop into nirvana. That's the soteriology of Buddhism. But other religions and philosophies. Do all religions and philosophies have a soteriology? And that is the challenge of comparative religion. In the bad old days, and certainly still in some Christian traditions, the idea is to say Christianity is the baseline, it's the right way, and all other religions succeed or fail according to how well they fit that pattern. Serious comparative religion no longer looks at it that way. Each religion is its own tradition from its own place in its own time, we nowadays think, but there you go. Yes, all religions and philosophies do deal with the human condition, however, and that really is the baseline. We say, okay, does soteriology, does salvation really reflect what happens in a human life that gets us out of the trouble of being human? And how often does that have to happen? And that's really the question. So all religions and all philosophies do deal with the human condition, but in different ways. And I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us today. You can catch more about First Unitarian Society on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can help us get the message out there by going to PayPal and or firstunitarian.org/donate. Thanks for joining us today.